Welcome to Bible Prayers and Untold Stories, where every whisper verse is truth, and every story brings light to the soul. Let us journey through the sacred words and uncover the wisdom hidden in prayer. There are truths that are not in books, not appearing in news reports or farewells. They remain in unopened diaries, in keys that no one dares to put in the lock, and in the last words whispered between life and death. Maria looked towards a cross. People know Jorge as a pope, but I used to call him brother. From here, the mist of the past begins to clear. A journey begins. Not a journey of canon law or power, but a journey of a soul that has gone to the end of the truth and collapsed under its burden. Prayer in the dark, the last secret of Pope Francis. The church bells rang, lingering in silence. Pope Francis' funeral. St. Peter's Square was covered in ash gray. Thousands of believers bowed their heads in sacred silence. People call him Pope Francis, the Holy Father of the world. But to me, he will always be Jorge, the child who ran barefoot in the sun, the boy who hid a wounded puppy in an old shirt, the brother who cried silently beside his father's coffin when the world was still sleeping. An old room in Buenos Aires. The candlelight flickered. Maria Elena sat at a wooden table, holding an old faded photo. It was Jorge as a child with a gentle smile but sad eyes. Studio microphone Maria, in a real, direct voice, soft but deep. I never wanted him to become pope, not because I doubted the faith, but because I understood that white throne is not only made of marble and gold. It was built from sacrifices that the world will never see, childhood memories. Jorge sat reading a book alone in the corner of the yard, the golden afternoon light shining on his neck. The sound of children's laughter echoed. The scene of his father's death. Jorge stood next to his mother, his hands clasped tightly, his eyes desolate and speechless. Jorge was not a child who liked to stand in front of a crowd. He did not dream of a throne, did not dream of fame. He only dreamed of erasing the mistakes of others, even though he had to carry everything on his back. Maria turned back to look at the audience. Her voice dropped like a confession, both sobbing and tormented. My brother was not chosen. He was pushed into that place. And the price to pay was not fame, but his own soul. The light dimmed. Maria raised her hand to touch the small cross hanging around her neck. Studio microphone Maria whispering, I once asked God, why did he choose my brother? And there are nights I wish he hadn't chosen. The Pope's chair is empty in the darkness. Below is the shadow of Jorge as a child, huddled in the corner. In contrast, the light from the cross in the distance slowly shines in. Sometimes glory is a mask of loneliness, and the Pope whom the whole world loves. Perhaps he was once just a child trying to save his own family. To understand a pope, first, you must understand his brother. An old house in Buenos Aires, 1948. Sunset. Wind blows through the creaking wooden windows. The sound of an Argentine radio echoes in the distance. A sad tango. Maria's voice is low, as if recounting an old wound. That memory I once buried, but the look in my brother's eyes that day, I will never forget. 12-year-old Jorge, who happened to be standing behind the half-open door. Inside, his father was holding a strange woman and a little girl. No one saw Jorge, but Jorge saw everything. Jorge's eyes were wide open, but there were no tears, only emptiness. Maria's voice echoed. Those eyes were no longer those of a child. From that moment, Jorge lost his innocence. Jorge stepped back from the threshold, trembling, his back against the wall. The surroundings blurred. His heart pounded loudly. A statue of the Virgin Mary swayed before his eyes, as if falling. Studio microphone Maria continued. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't cry. He didn't blame. But from then on, he never looked at his father the same way. And he began to seek God, not because he believed, but because he needed a place to hide his filth. Jorge entered the church for the first time, the sunlight through glass windows shining on his face, creating a halo around his head. He knelt down silently, His hands tightly held an old piece of paper with his father's handwriting. "You are my pride." Studio microphone Maria, voice choked. "My brother did not become a monk because of a call from heaven. He went to atone for his father and to wash away the stain of our shared blood." Jorge grew up, his face becoming more and more silent. He refused all love offers, spent his youth in a room reading the Bible and serving the poor. But his eyes still held an inexpressible sadness. "Maria, people admire my brother's humility, but no one knows it is repentance disguised as humility. No one knows. Jorge is afraid of living a life like his father." Late at night, Jorge, now a young man, sits alone in the empty chapel. The light is dim yellow. The wind whistles through the cracks in the door. He whispers as if praying. Studio microphone Jorge whispering, "Lord, if I cannot erase the past, please let me exchange my life, so that the light may shine on forgotten souls." A dim light from the cross illuminates Jorge's face, now calm, not happy, not in pain, just ready to take on the burden. A vocation does not always begin with faith. Sometimes it is born from a wound that no one sees. An old, stained letter is placed next to an antique brass key. The camera slowly moves from Maria's hand to the content of the letter. The handwriting is shaky and slanted. Studio microphone Maria's narration in a soft, distant voice. "Before leaving Argentina, Jorge gave me two things, a letter and a key to a place where the light cannot reach. If one day you can no longer hear me in the midst of prayer, go where no one prays. Find your way beneath the marble and gold, where even the light avoids." Maria stands in front of an old iron door, deep in a little-known area of the Vatican. On the lock, the symbol of St. Peter's cross key is faintly engraved. Studio microphone Maria, "I kept my word. For years I did not touch that key, because I was afraid not of the truth, but of how it would kill the rest of my faith." Maria, after the news of Jorge's death, finally puts the key in the lock. The click, sound echoes. The door slowly opens, candlelight illuminating piles of dusty files, handwritten cassette tapes, documents sealed with red wax seals. Studio microphone narration. In that cellar, there is no angelic song, only the whispers of forgotten souls. Maria begins to open the first file. The shaky handwriting in old Italian reads, "Abusi non registrati," files never recorded. Studio microphone Maria, whispering. Inside is a list of children. No names, no photos, no justice. And beside it are the signatures of the most powerful. Images of each page of documents. Statistics of bribes. Recordings of secret meetings between the Vatican and the dictatorship. Letters of distress that were never answered. Studio microphone, combined narrative of Maria and Jorge from the diary. Faith is not always destroyed from the outside. Sometimes it rots in the hands that recite the prayers every day. Maria sits silently before the documents. She does not cry, but her eyes are filled with an unexploded storm. Studio microphone Maria, looking up at the crucifix. "I used to believe that the church was a fortress of light, but today in that very fortress, I see darkness thicker than sin out there." The second letter was never opened. The envelope contained only one line, Jorge's handwriting. "If you read what's in there, forgive me. I didn't have the courage to do what needed to be done. Under the Vatican, there are not only bones, but also unbaptized truths." The Vatican hospital room, in the dim light of the late afternoon. A gentle breeze blew in from the high window, shaking the white curtains. Jorge lay on the bed, his face pale, his thin hand on his chest, his rosary beside him. Studio microphone Maria's narration, voice choked, but even and clear. "In the last days, my brother didn't talk much. But on the fourth night, when I was alone in the bed, he suddenly took my hand and whispered." Scroll Jorge whispering, "Tell them about the children." Maria pauses. The camera pans from Maria's face to Jorge, who is looking up at the ceiling with a distant look in his eyes. Studio microphone Maria replied in a whisper, "Which children, Jorge?" Jorge's face is a close-up. His eyes are no longer filled with pain, only sadness like a crack in his soul. Scroll Jorge. The children who are not recorded, unremembered, the children who have never had a record, but every night their cries still echo in my dreams. They live far away, where the church does not want to reach. Abused, then forgotten. No one records them. No one prays for them. They are souls never confessed. Back in the hospital room, Jorge tremblingly opens a small drawer, takes out an old wooden rosary, discolored by time. Scroll Jorge whispering, "This rosary once belonged to a boy in Misiones, Argentina. He went to church 3 times and was rejected all 3. A week later, he took his own life. I kept his rosary for 40 years. Maria takes the rosary. Her hands tremble slightly. The light from the window shines in, reflecting on the wooden beads, creating a faint glow like a sacred fire. Studio microphone Maria. I have never seen you cry like that. Not because of the pain, but because of the guilt you feel for not being able to save that child." Jorge closes his eyes, his hand on Maria's forehead. Scroll Jorge. I promise you, if the world wants to remember you, let them remember the children you couldn't save. Maria, alone in her room, holding the wooden rosary, steps outside. It's about to rain. The wind blows hard. The rosary shakes softly, glowing silently against the sad gray of the sky. There are souls never recorded in the holy book, but they are the true call of mercy. The rosary is not blessed, but carries the size of souls that no one counts. The church bells ring again. The screen slows down. Stone steps leading to the top of the Vatican. People pour into St. Peter's Square. White smoke rises from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel. A new pope has been chosen. Studio microphone Maria's voice, slowly, tormented. My brother once said, the successor was chosen before he died, not by God, but by his promise to keep silent. Cardinal Matteo Tedesco's face, in his crimson robes, a calm smile. His eyes are sharp. The crowd applauds. But the camera pans slowly to Maria, standing still in the shade, not applauding, not congratulating. Studio microphone Maria. Tedesco, a public hero. But in Jorge's diary, his name is accompanied by silent fear. An old room in Buenos Aires. A wooden chest sits in the middle of the room. Maria unlocks it. Inside are handwritten diaries, letters, and documents labeled non-divulgare, not to be published. Studio microphone Maria, in a low voice, turning pages. Here lies Jorge's soul. Each page is a forced silence. Each line is a betrayal. Each letter is a confession, not to man, but to God. Jorge's diary entry. His voice echoes as if from somewhere else, deep within his soul. Open book Jorge, from the diary entry. They told me not to talk about the 1997 abuses in South Sudan. They told me to stop mentioning the buried files from Latin America. I kept quiet because I feared the collapse of the church. But the truth is, I betrayed the children I wanted to save. Maria faces a Vatican cardinal in a closed room. The lighting is dim. The man held out a thick envelope, like a bribe or a threat. Studio microphone Maria. They came to me, gently, politely, and very clearly. Either I kept quiet or I would be the cause of chaos. Maria returned to the small church in her hometown. She sat in silence, the old wooden beads resting in her palms. The beads glowed softly, like a light of conscience from the souls of uncounted children. Studio microphone Maria. I don't know what to do. Keep everything to keep the church safe, or light up the last thing Jorge left behind. Even though I know that light could burn his image, Maria was faced with 2 paths, one leading to the lit chapel, the other to the dark archives. The wind blew the diary pages in her hands. There are promises that are not kept by actions, but by suffering, at the cost of a soul that chose silence out of love. But true love, perhaps, is not afraid of the light. The truth can hurt the church, but silence once killed a child. Back to the room where it all began. Maria sits alone in the twilight. The window is open. The wind is blowing. The wooden chest is now open. The diaries are scattered on the table. An unsent letter is placed in her hands. Studio microphone Maria, voice soft, deep. I have read it all. Every line, every page, every silent plea, and every cry that was never spoken. Maria, my brother was no saint. He was a lost soul with too much responsibility on his shoulders, and a heart too soft to ignore the things that cannot be said, to keep silent or to speak. I am not sure which is right, but one thing I know for sure, those children deserve to be remembered, not because they were victims, but because they believe in the divine. There are truths that are not in the Bible. There are prayers that are never said aloud. But the ultimate place of faith is not perfection, but the courage to face the darkness. God knows everything, but he waits to see which of us will dare to speak. Based on the unpublished notes of Maria Elena Bergoglio, a story that no one wants to tell, but needs to be heard,